acting was a magical shield. Being fat was not shameful because if I'm playing somebody who's supposed to be this way, then I'm not wrong for being this way.
And what's the weight like at this point?
Damn near 500 pounds. Wow. On blow, yeah.
Your story is remarkable. Like, this arc of transformation is really an astonishing thing.
I thought about it like the weight was the problem, realizing that the weight is a byproduct or a symptom of the issue.
What do you think is the differentiator between somebody who can make this type of change and sustain it versus the person who gives up?
I think that
all of the work that you've done in film and television is worthy of, like hours and hours of conversation, because I know you're like loaded to bear with like all kinds of amazing stories. Hopefully, you'll tell a few. But the story behind the story is this remarkable journey that you've been on to, really just, reclaim yourself, honestly. Like, there's an extraordinary weight loss story in there. There is a sobriety story in there. And these things are all kind of intertwined. So, I don't even know where to jump in other than to kind of start at the beginning and to do a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I mean, you grew up in Hollywood, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was born in New York, but my parents were theater actors. When my mom got pregnant with me, they decided together that it was not a great lifestyle for kids. Which I didn't take that lesson from them. And also, I think I'd gotten my act together by the time I had kids so that it was a good lifestyle for my kids. But they moved out here, oddly, for my dad to become a contractor. And my mom became like a stay-at-home mom who ran the accounting for his business.
And so what kind of kid were you? Like, just riding your bikes around the streets of LA?
Yeah.
Like a mob, getting into trouble?
Yeah.
From day one?
From day one. I was...
What high school did you go to?
I went to a high school called the Delphian Academy in La Cañada, but I stopped going to school at 14 and started to like really pursue trouble at that point. Yeah.
With a little side hustle called acting?
No, I didn't start acting until I was 17. So there was an arrest in there in the late 80s, which still frequently comes up when I go to renew my global entry or my TSA pre-check. They very much want me to announce that, yes, I have a felony weapons possession arrest on my record from, I think, 1988.
And you were how old then?
12 maybe.
Whoa.
And it sounds really scary, but I was a kid playing with nunchucks in a park.
Oh, so you didn't have a handgun or something like that?
No, but strangely, I was told at the time, had I had a handgun, it would have been a misdemeanor.
How does that work out?
Handguns are misdemeanors. Nunchucks were felony at the time.
So what was the animated energy at that point? I mean, were you just rebellious, or what were you rebelling against? Or was it chaos in the home, or what was happening?
The chaos, I think, look, I don't know. This is like a chicken and the egg kind of a question for me. And I've tried to do some real soul searching. I was put on my first diet at 5 years old. And when I look at pictures of me at 5, I do not see a kid that needs to be put on a diet. There's plenty of kids today that I look at and I go, in the most non-judgmental way possible, like, that kid's eating is out of control. That was not like when I look, but for whatever reason, my parents saw something in me and thought, like, we got to nip this in the bud before it gets out of control. And so I don't know if I was experiencing this turmoil prior to that, or that was the catalyst, but kind of from that moment on, I learned to do the things that I wanted to do in secret. And I started to cheat and lie to eat in the way I wanted to eat because I was not interested in a diet at 5 years old. There were times in my adolescence where I was interested in a diet and losing weight, but I didn't stick to them for a long time.
So the message coming down on you, although well-intentioned, was basically there's something broken in you and you need to follow our direction because you're maybe not bad or a bad person, but you're flawed in some way and you need to be fixed. And in order to be fixed, you need to follow our direction.
Yeah.
And you were having none of that.
I was having none of that.
Yeah.
But it got way more complicated too, because I think initially it was just restrictive of like, here's the portion of food you're going to eat. Nothing was really changed with the food.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that didn't work, we lived in California, in Los Angeles. And so every fad diet that hit Los Angeles, I was then put on. So there was, early Atkins diet, early blood type diet, early Candida diet, seeing nutritionists, all of these things. There was one really crazy incident where my mom took me to somebody's guest house in Glendale, and this woman, took a Polaroid of me, smeared some water on it, and based on the rainbow coloring on the back of the Polaroid, charged some water and told us if I just drink a capful of this water before every meal, I swear to God, I would lose weight. And it was like, you don't have to restrict his food if he drinks this water. And then there were all kinds of stipulations about like nothing can touch the water. The water goes into a cap and then into your mouth, but like you can't put your lips on the water. It was like,
oh my God,
real insanity, to the point where like even today when I hear about some of the diets, I get like PTSD, shell shock kind of like memories of my childhood of like, yeah, these crazy diets have been around forever. And I was put on them and I rebelled, and part of that rebellion. And then there was, my discovery of alcohol and drugs. My parents were, for all intents and purposes, sober. There was never alcohol in our house, but they weren't sober in the way that I'm sober. It just wasn't a thing. And so when I started to have trouble, I had nobody to communicate with that about. I had so much shame about that, and so many years of shame about my body and food that it just got very out of hand.
How old were you when drugs and alcohol entered the picture?
14.
14.
Yeah.
Was it drinking first?
Drinking, yeah.
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 And that was just another thing that you, from the get-go, would just hide?
Yeah.
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 Did you have a sense early on that it was problematic for you compared to like your friends?
Yes. I went through bouts of telling my friends I was going straight edge, just so that I could drink in secret, because every time I drank openly, I got blackout drunk and caused some kind of scene. So yeah. I not in a way where I knew like, oh, I have a real problem with this, but it was the concern angle. Like I didn't like the attention from others about concern on me, which I experienced with my weight many times, and then with drugs and alcohol too. And
what was the experience of being drunk for the first time or those early years? Like, did it feel like it alleviated a lot of that pain and angst of, that was making you rebellious, or, what was the safe that got unlocked with that key?
Yeah, it separated me from my shame. Totally. There was a feeling of dread that just went away when I drank. And then, the problem with drinking for me was that the end result of drinking on any given night was blackout drunk and waking up with even more severe shame. When I found opiates, that kind of handled that. I could get that separation and then just keep it going and ride that forever, basically. How did you get your hands on opioids for the first time? Like when you're in like high school or whatever? No, it was like, I think the first opioids I had was 96. I had my gallbladder removed, and I was in the hospital with a morphine drip and a pump that you hit every 7 minutes. And I just was like playing a video game, just constantly pushing that button. It didn't help. I remember having this thought in the hospital, like, this isn't taking the pain away, but I don't care about the pain when I hit that button. And it wasn't just physical pain from the operation. It was just the burden of being alive was gone every time I hit it.
How big were you in high school?
Well, I left high school at 14. So I was probably 350. Yeah, I was big.
Yeah, so pretty big.
Yeah.
And then how does the acting enter the picture?
Acting was this amazing thing. Two things occurred in my school. Were a couple of actors, Soleil Moon-Frye and Giovanni Ribisi, and I noticed with them that the other kids weren't looking at Soleil Moon-Frye and Giovanni Ribisi necessarily. They were looking at the characters these people played on TV. And that kind of looked to me like a magical shield. It looked like a force field from like peering at the person to peering at some facade that's built up in some other area of their life. So that was interesting.
And you had conscious awareness of that, or is that something you pieced together looking back on it?
That's something I pieced together looking back on it. But I definitely saw that there was a distraction with these kids that I wanted because it was a distraction. And then another thing that happened was I did a play in school at 13 or 14, and I played Mr. Bumble in Oliver Twist. And there was a moment where being fat was not shameful because the character was meant to be fat. And so there was this kind of amazing thing of like, if I'm playing somebody who's supposed to be this way, then I'm not wrong for being this way. So there were kind of two things that were occurring that got me really interested in acting. It's like a solution
to that sense of feeling like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about, hiding, and how once you were sort of noticed for your screen appearances, when people would look at you, you could say they're looking at me because they recognize me from something they saw me in. They're not looking at me because I'm fat.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what was true or wasn't. You could like make that argument to yourself.
Yeah.
But there's also that thing that's very common with actors, which is perhaps some discomfort with who they are, and acting allows you to hide, in all of these characters. And
it's fucking
you
great,
can just put
dude.
the mask on, and you don't really have to confront yourself.
Yeah, you get to be somebody else.
Yeah,
yeah. It's like an out of body experience.
It's like
it's
almost like a defense mechanism or like a coping strategy.
Yeah.
But in your case, like, you found success pretty quickly.
Yeah, immediately.
Like
my
a
first
kid.
audition was Boy Meets World.
First audition.
Yeah.
Wow. And then that's like network television, right? So it's like real money. All of a sudden, like, your life changes like pretty fast, I would imagine.
Yeah, I had a strained relationship with my father. We tried to dance around all these diets with my mom, doing a version of like, let's figure out how it's the food's fault. Like, there was a time period where I couldn't eat anything red. It was red food's fault. And then there was another time where it was anything white. I couldn't eat anything white. And then it was Candida's fault. Just these diets that were very much like, the problem is exterior to us entirely. But when I was 10, my dad said, like, if you get to be 200 pounds, I am going to control what you eat. And at that point, our relationship became very strained because I did hit 200 pounds at 10. And it didn't last very long where he was trying to actively control what I ate, because I would just go when he wasn't around and eat stuff. There were no like padlocks on our refrigerator. But I when I started doing Boy Meets World, I took my dad on a trip. The first money I ever spent was taking my dad on a trip to an island. And I was still terrifically uncomfortable being in public. So we would go and find like secluded beaches to hang out. We were staying at a big resort, but I didn't want to be around people. So we would drive and find like some empty, desolate beach and go snorkeling there. And on the last day, he wanted to stay by the pool. And so I said, okay. And we're sitting there and I saw this is very early on in my career. I saw some kids looking at me. And of course, in that moment, we're in a foreign country and I'm feeling very much like these kids are looking at me because I'm fat. And I was horrified that they were going to make a scene in front of my dad. And over the course of about a half an hour, they started playing closer and closer to where we were sitting. And at a certain point, one of them got up the nerve to like walk up to us. And my heart rate is probably at 200 at this point because I'm like terrified that the whole trip is going to be tainted with this thing that my dad, like I feel shame about, but I'm also aware that my father feels shame about whatever's happened to his son. I was at least 400 pounds at this point. And the kid says to me, "Are you Frankie from Boy Meets World?" And it was maybe the first time I felt pride in front of my father, because they were in fact looking at me because I was on TV.
Right. And you're not broken.
Right.
Like you're actually,
they're looking at me because they like me.
Like this switch gets flipped and you're like, it's all good.
Yeah.
Right. Like maybe I don't have to worry about this. I can just inhabit this character and bank the checks and, set aside all this weight stuff, all the baggage of that, and then, booze it up.
Right.
And, whatever confused emotions come up, those are easily compartmentalized.
That's right. Shove them off, bury
And so
them.
off you go.
Yeah.
And then you end up in mall rats when you're still really young as well, right? But now you have to be on a movie set. You got to control things a little bit, don't you? Like, does it start to spill into the work?
I had this rationalization for many years that I never missed a day of work. And that was kind of something that kept me going, this idea like,
as long as you make it to the gym, as long as you show up on time for work, all of these things.
You don't have to think about them.
It's two things. Tell me if this resonates with you. Like, one, it's a great crutch to, convince you that there's nothing wrong and you can keep going and everything's fine. And it also fuels a bit of narcissism that you can do both, right? Like, oh, I can do all this partying and I can do all these normal people go to bed early, but I'm possessed with great powers where I can do it all. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about this recently because like there were sleepless nights. There was in the late 90s, like a bizarre moment where there was a heroin drought in Los Angeles. And so I'm like making it to work, but dope sick and 500 pounds and just a mess, but still going like, well, this drought's not going to last forever. Got to get through the day. And I wasn't late. I didn't miss a day of work, like that rationalization is still going. And recently, I've been dieting for basically the last 23 years and to some degree or another, different diets and different schemes and all of that and different workouts. But like, I don't really eat ice cream and I miss ice cream. And then they come out with this stuff, Halo Top, which is like diet ice cream.
Yeah.
And I eat some of it and it's magical, but the stuff gives me a hangover. And I'm like waking up going like, I used to not sleep and show up to work dope sick. And it feels like maybe that was less horrible than this Halo Top hangover.
You've become you've become a little snowflake.
Yeah.
You're
like, what's happened
sensitive
to me?
system.
I've weakened myself. Yeah.
Remember when I could do that? Yeah. It should be said, I haven't said it yet out loud, but like your story is remarkable. Like this arc of transformation is really an astonishing thing. And it's a credit to you for everything that you put into, making you into the man that you are today. It's incredibly inspiring. I know it's inspiring to, millions of people across the world. But I think, within that, one of the things I like about it is that, or what I think is so powerful about your story is that it's not as if you drew a line in the sand and like walked over it and then just, you were a different person and you never went back. Like it's littered with like relapses and failed diets. And for every step forward, there's 2 steps back. Like it's a very human story in that it's littered with like all this toil and experimentation. Like it's not just a upward trajectory. You know what I mean?
Close,
like you suffered and, experimented and done everything, to finally figure out like what works for you.
Yeah. There's such a draw to the sales pitch of just step over that line in the sand. I stepped over that line in the sand 50 times. That just got fucking knocked back on the other side of it pretty rapidly each time. That just do X is great marketing for somebody who's desperate.
Yeah. And in the narrative that ends up in the press around you, like I did, like just in my normal prep for Pi, I was like, oh, what are some of the recent news stories? And it's like yesterday or today, there's like a Daily Mail, like one of those things, like incredible before and after. And, and it's true, but what's lost in that is
20
like
20 years of work in there.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to highlight that because, for somebody who's watching this or listening to this, who's looking for some guidance here, it's a hopeful message. Like you don't have to do it perfectly. It doesn't happen overnight. It took you 20 years. It's still like an ongoing battle. And this shit is hard, and it doesn't, it's not a math equation.
It's not. And it's, like, first of all, I share all this very selfishly. Because part of what I came to find was like I would lose weight and get to a point where I would go like, oh, I think this is a healthy weight. I haven't experienced the nirvana or the enlightenment that I was thinking I would experience, but I think I'm at a healthy weight. Now I'm going to just forget that and pretend that I wasn't 500 pounds. I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to think about it because that's still shameful and painful. And that was not successful either. That always collapsed too. And so I found that like the more I talk about it, the more I keep it in the forefront of my mind, the more I'm able to win every day. So it is slightly selfish that I am communicating about it because, sometimes my wife is like, the drug piece is from further in the past than weight, where I don't know that today, I'm going to touch wood, but like today is not going to be super hard for me to get through the day without like needing to use, but I'll eat today. And every time I eat, there's going to be a little bit of a conversation in my head around the food. And my wife is sometimes like, why do you even bring up the drug stuff anymore? But there's such corollaries to them that for me, I can't take them apart. They are very, very similar in what it was for me to get through that.
Yeah. There's so much in what you just said. Obviously, the food thing and the drugs and alcohol, of course, they're intertwined. Like they're both ways to numb your feelings and escape and, run away from whatever emotional pain you're feeling. And they're very effective at that, right? I suspect you would say food is your drug of choice.
Yeah. Well, I think if I'd seen you 20 years ago, it might even be more than that, 25 years ago at this point, I don't know that I would have said that when I had opiates. But I would always end the night with food, even if that screwed up the high from the opiates. So maybe today, food is my drug of choice because I still have to eat. I can't be abstinent from food.
Yeah, which makes it really tricky. Sobriety, abstinence, it's very binary, and your relationship with food can't be binary. And as much as it's important to create guardrails and rules around it, you have to have some level of flexibility if you're going to sustain any kind of healthy habit.
Yeah.
Which gets into all this weird gray zone.
Yeah, I found that when I was trying to be the most pious version of myself with food, that was not sustainable. And when I was just, letting my hair down and doing whatever I wanted, that was very clearly not sustainable. So like the search for radical moderation is very
both
real.
of which trigger shame, right?
Yeah.
If you have this deeply held shame about like how you appear or how you feel, and you set yourself up for failure with an overly restrictive diet, you're going to be ashamed of yourself when you fall short.
Yeah.
But if you let yourself loose, you're going to feel like shit too. And then you have to find a way to be somewhere in the middle and eat things maybe, that other diet wouldn't allow you to without feeling that, without that like shame impulse coming up.
Yeah. It's a very
tough,
tricky
man.
thing to navigate, especially when, what's the big one today? People are trying to sell you on, if you just eat meat and that's it, then you don't have to think about anything else. It's hard to get the message across that like it might be, and again, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but for me, I found, because I tried those structures, that wasn't it, that it was more, it was internal, it was behavioral, it was seeking emotional comfort through the thing. It wasn't just the fact that, I was eating lectins or carbohydrates or seed oils or whatever is taboo and whatever will be taboo next week. Red dye number 40. It wasn't that was causing me to overeat. I can overeat steak. I can overeat, vegetables. If that was, I'll go find Veggie Grill if I'm being vegan. Like this is not, it is not the food that is causing this condition in me.
And what's causing it is in part physiological, like these, biological cravings. But there's also, the childhood trauma piece, like everything that like led you to that point. Like if you don't untie that knot, like it's going to continue to activate and agitate you. So in the drugs and alcohol context, that's the difference between abstinence and sobriety, right? So if you're not willing to like look into that and start to heal those parts of yourself, you're like a dry drunk. You're just like clenching on for dear life. And at some point it's all going to shatter and fall on top of you.
Life isn't fun. You get no joy out of it. Like, there should be joy.
But on the selfish piece of like sharing your story and talking about it a lot, there's a service aspect to that. Like in sharing it, you're helping other people. And, the analog in AA is like, people are always like, why do you go to these meetings and like talk about stuff you did 30 years ago or whatever? Because it helps you stay vigilant. And it's also helpful for other people to hear that.
Yeah.
Like they need to be able to find a way to connect with your story, find a piece of themselves in it. So that they can connect with what you did to kind of claw out of it and build this new life.
Yeah. I think being of service is really important, but it does always come back to like, if I wasn't getting my sobriety or my keeping diet in the forefront of my mind, would I still do it? I don't know.
But that is the vigilance piece, right? As we all dive into our 2025 health goals, there's something crucial we often overlook, and that is proper hydration. And here's the thing, it's not just about drinking more water, it's about maintaining the right balance of water and minerals. And by minerals, I mean electrolytes. And what's fascinating is that drinking too much plain water can actually be counterproductive by diluting your electrolyte levels and leading to things like fatigue, headaches, and muscle cramps. And that's why I'm excited about Element, a zero sugar electrolyte drink mix with the perfect balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and my workout go-to. What I appreciate about Element is its science-based approach to hydration. They've created something that's both effective but also delicious, whether you're mixing their citrus salt with water or adding chocolate salt to your morning coffee, which may sound weird, but is actually weirdly delicious. Get a free sample pack of Element's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase at drinkelement.com/richroll. Find your favorite Element flavor or share with a friend. Movement has shaped my life. It's a teacher, it's a mirror into the soul, and it's a path that not only connects you more deeply with yourself, but also with others and the world we share. All paths require tools, and those tools matter. That's why I've partnered with On, a brand that honors this movement path with premium sportswear to support it. everything that On makes is next level in design, clean and always with function top of mind, lightweight, breathable, and built to adapt. It's gear that disappears on the body, so you can fully drop into the experience of movement. Head to on.com/richroll to explore their performance-driven collection. I watched Unstoppable the other night.
Oh, yeah?
That movie is badass.
Yeah, that was an awesome movie.
And I revisited it, A, because I knew you were coming on, but also because I know that Quentin Tarantino had listed it among like his top movies of the 2010s. Did you know this?
I didn't know that.
He's like, this movie rules.
That's awesome.
And it does. It just like propels itself forward. It's not any longer than it needs to be. And it's like, it hits all the beats. And it's just an example of why Tony Scott is an absolute master of the form. He was
incredible. Yeah. With the first scene in that movie that we did, me and TJ Miller, got golf carted out to meet Tony, and we're standing next to a train, and it's just us and Tony, and he's talking to us about the scene, and we run it with him a couple of times, and then he kind of goes away, and we're standing there like, well, should we go to our chairs? What should we do? And there's nobody in sight, and we just hear from a really far distance action. And we're like looking at each other like, are they talking to us? Like, we don't know what's going on here. And then we hear just this insane screaming and profanity and like, what the fuck? Come on, I said action. Can you not hear me? And he can hear us talking. And we're like, is he talking to us? Yes, I'm fucking talking to you. And he had like cameras with NASA lenses on them in every like window of faraway buildings, and the entire thing was being shot from a distance that we just couldn't see anybody. It was I mean, one of the wildest experiences of my acting career.
You guys are just out there freewheeling. Like so you could shoot the entire scene without coverage, right? Yeah. And you two were just absolute knuckleheads,
totally. Yeah.
And then you're cheering at the end, and I'm like, yeah, but these guys fucked up the whole thing,
The whole thing. Yeah, people got mad at me, and I like took a little flack. They were like, why'd you let that train get away? And I was like, there's no movie. If the train doesn't get away, then nothing happens. We had to do it.
You're the inciting incident of the entire prospect, the entire enterprise of the movie. You've worked with like a lot of the greats, man. Scorsese, Wolf of Wall Street, Darren Aronofsky, The Fountain. I think that movie's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Tony Kaye, American History X. Like, you have, sidled up with, some of the best to ever do it.
Yeah. I have a career that I have one regret, but I have no, like, I look back on it and I feel so like honored to have been in some of those movies.
Do most people know you from My Name is Earl?
Yeah.
That's what you get stopped for the most?
That, and oddly Boy Meets World, which was my first job, 1993 or 1994, but the show never went off the air. It was in syndication on the Disney Channel for the last 30 years.
How old were you when you first got on that show?
17.
Wow.
Yeah.
My Name is Earl is having a bit of a resurgence, though.
I've heard that on TikTok.
My kids, when I told my kids you were coming in, they're like, oh, we love My Name's Earl. And my 30-year-old was saying, oh yeah, like Gen Z's all over this. It's like the new Suits,
Right. It's crazy.
It's weird how like these old shows just percolate up and like find a new audience. I mean, I guess that's a gift of like everything being digital and available. But that's got to be a cool feeling, like a whole new generation of people finding your stuff.
It's always odd when it comes back. Like my little kids who are now 18 and 20, when we shot My Name is Earl, one was not born and the other was like 2. And so they never experienced it while it was happening. But when I came home one day when they were teenagers, very young teenagers, and they were just watching the show like, Dad, why didn't you tell us about this? Show's great. And that was weird. And it's very weird now when somebody who's very clearly too young to have watched Boy Meets World 30 years ago, somebody who's like in their teens says what a fan of Boy Meets World they are. Or even My Name is Earl, a teenager today wasn't alive when it was being shot. it is a bizarre thing because that's 20 years in the past for me.
So let's go back to the timeline. So
okay.
you get through mall rats.
Over the place.
You know,
mall rats.
I don't know what comes after that. I mean, you're in a bunch of stuff.
Well, mall rats.
I mean, when does it start like really getting out of control?
Mall rats is a funny one because we go to do mall rats, and Kevin Smith had huge success. You know, he made this movie, Clerks, for no money, that then made, you know, millions and millions of dollars. And then he had millions of dollars to make mall rats.
This was his first opportunity to make like kind of I don't know, was it a studio movie? It was a studio movie, yeah.
And we were like, oh, well, if he made millions we're going to make billions. Mallrats going to be the biggest movie ever. And it was a total failure. And so then it was like Mallrats came out, nothing happened, back to the grindstone. Like drugs didn't pick up with me for probably a year from Mallrats, like real daily drug use. I was a dabbler before that. Yeah. And then I had this operation. I left knowing that whatever I had in the hospital was what I needed at all times.
The opioids like lit you up. Like that was the thing, right?
Yeah. They pressed a button in me that, you know, the last surgery I had to have an argument with the anesthesiologist saying like, you cannot give me opioids when I'm unconscious. And he was like, it won't matter when you're unconscious. And I said, yes, it will. Like,
it's activated. The lizard
something
brain.
happens. Yeah, I will wake up and I'll probably wake up no matter what saying, give me drugs. You can't give them to me then either. Which doctors don't really love to hear. You know, they want to keep you calm and sedate. And I understand that. But like for me, I can't have them.
Yeah. Was it oxycodone, Vicodin, or what? You know, what was it? Percocet?
No, it was Vicodin at first, and then there was a Mexican bakery on Kenmore and 3rd, which I don't know if I'm outing people right now, but I doubt it's still there. This was the 90s. And you could go in and buy Vicodin for $1 a pill, Mexican Vicodin. And then when that went dry, it was, you know, hitting up doctors for prescriptions and then finding a doctor who was knowingly giving you stuff that you weren't faking, or you weren't talking about your sciatic nerve and stuff. You were just going in and like getting the prescriptions.
Yeah, there's no pretense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be not easy to do these days, I would imagine.
I wouldn't know, but it wasn't super hard back then. There were like pain clinics, you know, where you could just go and get a ton of pills. I haven't seen an actual pain clinic in a while.
I think when the shit came down on the Sackler family and all of that, a lot of those pain clinics went away.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of like underground shit.
Yeah.
And then of course, like when you run out of, you know, scripts, or you can't find the Mexican bakeries closed or whatever. I mean, that's sort of like the portal to heroin, because that's what leads so many people to heroin.
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
That's what led me to heroin.
Yeah. And how far did that go for you?
That was a couple of years of heroin use.
When did the movie Blow fall into this?
Blow was
timeline?
In the late 90s. Blow was like 98 or 99, maybe 98. I think. And that was still pills. Still pills. Yeah.
But there's some weird irony that you're doing that movie while you're just, you know, blowing it out.
Yeah. I think it was still pills. I mean, I have a vague memory of I don't know what the statute of limitations on this stuff is, but like of traveling through customs with stuff taped to my ankle. But I think I flew back from Mexico shooting that movie with a lot of pills.
Were they aware of what was going on with you at the time? Like the crew and the director? And
not to the extent that it was going on.
You were hiding it pretty well.
Yeah.
And what's the weight like at this point?
Damn near 500 pounds. Wow. On Blow, yeah. By the time I did... like a movie called The First 20 Million is Always the Hardest and The Butterfly Effect, I was over 500 pounds.
Wow. What is the just the daily experience of being that big like?
I would go to sleep at night thinking I would most likely die because it was hard to breathe laying down. So I would have like a lot of pillows set up so that I was propped up in bed, because laying flat on my back, I actually couldn't breathe. There was just too much weight on my chest. And then every morning that I woke up, I would just get high to not think about the fact that I was pretty happy that I survived the night.
Mm. And then just moving around, like just simple stuff, right?
Yeah. It was, I mean, if I throw a 35-pound kettlebell in a backpack right now and go for a walk, it's a nightmare. And I was 300 pounds heavier then than I am now, which is, it's hard to recall. A lot of the things that affected me in my day-to-day then, I still have creep up in my life today. Like I have just extreme anxiety about going to the airport, because the airport is walking around, and the airport there's a time deadline. And this all was prior to TSA PreCheck. So the airport is taking your shoes off, and all of that is a real chore for somebody who's 500 pounds.
And drug sniffing dogs,
yeah. All of it, yeah, but so like, I still have that anxiety about like, oh my God, am I going to have to rush at the airport? Is that going to ruin my day? And when I'm forced to, it doesn't. I've had to run to the gate, and then I get to the gate and I sit down in my chair, and I haven't even really broken a sweat. And I can just recall that my clothes would be soaked through sometimes by the time I got to the gate, if it was a far enough gate, and I can remember seeing people in, the little golf carts that were getting driven to. I wouldn't even take that because I was scared I would break it. And there would be a scene about me breaking a golf cart. You know what I mean? Like, and
being a public person, it would end up in,
or just even the attraction of eyes in that instance. I wanted as few eyes on me as possible. And so, but none of that is true today. And yet the anxieties from it linger.
Yeah. The story is so deeply grooved.
Yeah.
That it makes me sad that you still feel that. Like, looking at you, it's like hard to believe that that would occur to you.
It's cognitive dissonance, because I can talk myself through it. It's like doing maintenance on a diet. I'm an advocate for maintenance, like actively working to maintain your weight. You get to some place, you lose some weight, and then work to maintain it, because it is real work. But for me, there was so much effort for so long put into losing weight that when I'm putting effort into anything with food, I want the reward to be the scale moving down. And when the scale doesn't move down, it's this tremendous feeling of defeat. Even though what I'm actively working to do is make
succeeded.
The sales. Yes, I have won. And
but you're not getting that dopamine
hit. Can't take it. You can't separate them. So I've got to talk myself through it. Just like the airport, I've got to go like, if I'm late, I can sprint to the gate. I know this. This is true. It will not ruin my day. I will not break my leg running to the gate because of my weight. I will not be sweating so profusely that I'm leaking onto my neighbor in the neighboring chair. I will not have a heart attack because of that. I can take my shoes off while I'm still standing up. This is not the end of the world, but the tension in me from having to do those things, or the apprehension of having to do those things, is just as live as it was back then.
So there's this fear still inside of you that if you're not absolutely vigilant and your foot isn't on the pedal at all times, that you're just going to wake up and you're going to be that 500-pound guy again. Like, is that?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think that's true. I think that there is the knowledge that it could all unravel. But I also have to give myself some grace.
Yeah, that brought that up because it's like, it's okay, dude.
Yes.
Yeah. You
no,
know.
I'm trying to paint more of a picture of things that occur to me that I'm able to like rationalize and go like, I'm feeling this way, but that feeling is not.
To be an observer of those feelings rather than to indulge them.
Yeah.
Yeah. 500 pounds, sweating profusely.
It was rough.
High from the moment you wake up.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a sustainable lifestyle. Like, I'm curious around your relationship with hope and your future at that time.
There was no consideration of the future. There was only right now and today. In a strange way, that's how I live again. But I'm living in today with a lot of hope for the future. Whereas when I was living in today back then, the future was walled off. It was not a distant thought at all.
Were you actively keeping people at arm's length? Because I'm imagining you working on sets and like you're a sociable guy. Like I imagine you had friends.
Yeah.
Right? You had people around you. Was anybody trying to help you? I mean, it had to be obvious. You know, you were spiraling out of control.
Yes, I had. There were a couple of interventions which were jarring to me because I thought I'd been doing such a good job, you know.
Like every good addict believes.
Yeah, there was one point where my friends, you know, they did like a very gentle intervention. I got high in the bathroom, while they were all sitting there waiting for me to continue participating in this intervention. Then there was another one where it was a little bit more severe, where a mutual friend of ours, Scott G.
Oh, yeah.
Was sent with me to a location, and he got me through basically being dope sick at work. And then, I PR'd my into him into, like 2 weeks. I was like, I'm good now. I'm a sober person now. Bye, Scott. Thank you for everything, and kind of sent him on his way. And like, maybe the next day was on the phone to a doctor saying, I've hurt myself, and we were shooting a movie set in a hospital, and there were all kinds of, rigs and things lying around that I was going home with every night. But there were people who cared very much. And then towards the end, I think that it's very tricky. I've been asked a number of times, like, my son has a drug problem, please talk to them. And I'm more than willing to have any conversation with anybody. But my experience has been largely like, I didn't change until I wanted to change. I didn't change my eating. I didn't get off drugs. Like none of that happened because somebody said, I'm concerned about you. So even when my friends said, we're going to tell the producers of this movie that you're going to do that you have like a really severe drug problem unless you take this guy with you and get cleaned up.
Scotty G
came.
I didn't know you knew him. He's the best, man.
He's the best. I talk to Scott.
Oh, you do?
All the time. Yeah.
I spent some time with him this past summer in Michigan.
I love Scott. Yeah. He's a great guy.
Shout out Scott. I know he's listening.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. You can't instill willingness in another person.
Yeah.
And you also can't self-generate it really. Like it's like the thing I always say is it's like asking somebody to want something they don't actually want, or wishing that you wanted something that you don't actually want. Like you can kind of talk yourself into it, but if you don't really want it,
right, you're
not going to take the action or you're not going to be able to sustain that action.
Right. Like when I met Scott, I wanted to not be fired from the movie. I wanted to not be embarrassed. I wanted my friends to not spread the word that I had this problem. And in that moment, the path to that was sobriety. So I was like, great, if that's what I got to do, come on, Scott, let's go to Canada.
Just to get people off your back.
Basically. And within that, I think there were moments of like, sobriety might be better.
The little seedlings are being planted.
Like maybe
at someday.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe, this is rough. This sucks, but this would probably be better for me in the long run. But again, I didn't really want it. So it was like trying to talk myself into buying a car I didn't really want at the time.
So was there like a single bottom or a series of bottoms? Like it took you a bunch of tries and a bunch of stabs before this thing stuck. Yeah.
My bottom was being diagnosed with congestive heart failure. And the doctor, and this was one of those things, like I'm going to bed every night, pretty sure I'm going to die. But then I start swelling and the swelling's in my feet, and drugs are not getting me really high, and I'm doing an obscene amount of drugs, and it's not, and something's wrong. So I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? I have to get sick for a couple of days, and then the drugs will be more potent. And what would happen is I'd get sick for a couple of days and the swelling would go down. And then I'd use, and the drugs would have their potency back. But a couple of days in, the swelling would return. The swelling's moving up my legs, and then it gets to my groin, and it's really uncomfortable. And I went to see a doctor when I had done a couple of days being sick and clean, and the swelling was not going away. So then I'm just using and miserable and swollen and in pain. And the doctor says, you have congestive heart failure. You are going to die. And I'm like, okay, so now it's time to get sober. And the doctor says, yeah, you're going to die. I'm going to give you this diuretic, but and she's crying. And this is like my family doctor from when I'm a little kid.
And how old are you now?
20.
20.
Yeah. And she's like, no, I'm so sorry. You're going to die. Like if you get clean or not, this is going to kill you. And I thought, like, it'd be nice to leave my parents a clean corpse. Like that was my bottom.
Oh man.
And then I even had relapses from that, but they were briefer.
And did you end up going to a treatment center, or how did how did you take steps?
That was my third time in a treatment center.
You're the guy who goes and leaves early or whatever and holes up in some crack house somewhere.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I walked out of a couple of them. Yeah.
What stuck?
AA was really a big part of it. I had sober friends. I had people I could rely on, people I could talk to every day. When I came back from treatment the last time, I had a group of friends who I don't think any of them had a drink in front of me for 2 years. And they would come and get me and take me to a movie or out to dinner. Mm-hmm. I had a really solid group of guys that took care of me.
It's a weird experience when you have that deep shame and that sense of worthlessness, and you enter that community and all these people embrace you and genuinely are wanting to help you and make themselves available to you, but you don't trust it. You're like, this is some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, what's the angle? And for me, like, I kept it at arm's length to my peril for a long time until I realized, like, oh, this is how it works,
Yeah, I think I did too. But I had a couple of sober friends who I didn't keep them at arm's length. But I know what you're talking about. The broader picture, I was like, you I can trust. You I can trust. This guy I just met, I want to hear him talk, but I don't trust him.
Yeah. It is a miracle, though, that this thing exists where you can come in totally broken and hopeless, and hanging on by a thread and be taken in by these people who don't want anything from you. Yeah. Like it really is a remarkable thing. Yeah. I mean, it saved my life. Clearly it saved yours. Do you still have a relationship with AA?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Cool.
I went to a meeting this morning.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
A lot of people come to me who are suffering from health issues, but they also have a drug and alcohol problem. And they're looking for advice, but they're generally focused on like the fitness or the weight. I'm sure you get this a lot too. And my whole thing is like, none of that matters until you get sober. Like you can't do all of it at once. And unless you get sober, like it's all irrelevant. Like take care of that first and create a foundation. Don't worry about that other stuff. And then, when you have that foundation, you can begin to address those other things. Is that how you think about that?
I do. I kind of accidentally did it that way. But I was going to die so quickly from drugs that the rest of it wasn't even, it was just like, but I remember, there would be days in rehab going like, well, I want this. Like, you wake up one day and you want it more than you did yesterday, or you're going to want it the next day. And I would be like, yeah, I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to quit drinking coffee, and maybe I'm going to make better decisions in the food hall. And I'm, 550 pounds and maybe 3 weeks clean at this point, or 4 weeks clean. And I just wake up going like, I could turn everything around. And that would last until lunchtime. And then I'm drinking, caffeinated soda and having a cigarette and like, fuck it, that's too much. So I didn't really start thinking about my weight for another year or two. I continued to kind of wall it off and have it be like, well, this thing that I'm working on is so tenuous and so important. And so, I'm walking on a cliff's edge. I was gonna die. It's a miracle I didn't die. Okay, well, I'm not going to think about the other stuff right now. But I think it was by accident. So
at what point does that kind of enter the picture and you begin to put some pieces together on that? And how did you do that?
Well, I did it all backwards again. Like I wish I had just gone like, I'm going to apply everything I'm doing in my day-to-day life with drugs that I'm working on myself with food. I'm going to use the same kind of idea, but I didn't do that. I just went like, oh, I need to lose weight. I had a blinder on and I wasn't thinking about this. I need to think about this now. What do I do? But I thought about it like the weight was the problem. That once the weight is gone, the problem is gone. Mm-hmm. That it's an acute condition that I just need to excise, and then I won't have that condition anymore. And that took many years to parse out.
In other words, just like sobriety, it's a process. There's no destination here. Like you don't arrive at a certain weight and then you can wash your hands of it and you've achieved it and it's done.
Dude, I wanted that so badly. I was convinced that was what was going to happen, to the point that I went, when I was riding bikes a lot, I went to a doctor literally for him to say like, when does that, like, what is the weight I need to get to? Mm-hmm. Because I don't know. And I had in my head, I go to see the best sports nutrition doctor, famous guy, Dr. Huizenga, who I really like. And I walked in and I had in my head, I probably need to lose another 20 pounds. And I go in and I say, I just need you to tell me how much weight I need to lose. And I said to him, I think it's probably 20 pounds. And he said, no, much more than that.
How heavy were you then?
240. Uh-huh. He said, you got to get to 185. So 20 went to like 65. And I was kind of devastated in that moment. And then he said, we'll get you an exact number. We're going to have you do a DEXA scan. So I do the DEXA scan, come back. He looks at the scan. He says, this is not right. Go and do it again. I did a second DEXA scan. When we met again, he said, I'm wrong. You don't need to lose weight. You're 14% body fat. You're fine. You're done. No more weight loss.
At 240. You're just a big dude.
I'm a big dude. Yeah. I was riding a bike 100 miles a day.
I know I want to get into the whole cycling phase because you went hog wild with this.
I went hog wild.
You ride like every stage of the Tour de France one year.
Yeah.
Like you were,
and then
deep.
some. They didn't have Mount Ventoux on that year, so we went and rode that.
Was that like part of a tour or group?
I went with Team Radio Shack, with the executives from Team Radio Shack.
That happened. Wow.
It was awesome.
So that was during was that during the Lance comeback, or this was like Levi Leipheimer?
Yeah,
era?
Levi was leading. Lance was out there. I got to ride with Lance, which was amazing. But he was not a participant.
Yeah. And when you were deep into the cycling, you got down to like 200 or something like that?
I got close to 200, but that happens after Dr. Huizenga says you're 14% body fat.
Right, but you're convinced.
And I...
Because it's like, how far can I take this?
I'm not only convinced, I was angry with him. I was like, what do you know, dude? I shouldn't have even come here. Like, I came here for you to tell me a number.
Yeah.
You told me a big number, and I was like devastated, but I was going to hit that number. I would have gotten, if you had just left it at that, I would have gotten to 185. And I was 240 and 14% body fat. And at the time, I'm like, 14% body, that sounds too high. Like, I don't know what body fat means at that point, but I'm like, that's terrible. Shouldn't I be 2%? And he's like, no. 14 is fine. But I walked out going like, what does he know? I got to lose 20 pounds.
And you found the perfect vehicle to strip you of like every ounce of fat on your body, right? There's nothing like riding a bike all day, every day.
That's right. It was amazing. And in California, there's no better place. You can get long flat stretches, rollers on PCH, and then the most gnarly climbs ever.
And there's nothing like being able to attack those climbs and feeling strong doing it. Like you have to put in so much work to get there, but when you're there, it's a euphoric feeling.
Dude, the first time I did Latigo, I thought like this might be the last time I'm on a bike. And then not many months later, I invited a buddy who was an amateur cyclist in college, but like a Cat 2 cyclist. And I dropped him and waited for 15 minutes at the top of Latigo for him and was just like, oh my God, I can do anything on this bike. If I just keep doing it, I can do anything.
And being able to do that at 200 pounds, like it's the ultimate weight weenie sport, right? It's just like there is an obsession with weight in that sport that probably played into like all of your like, neurosis around this.
Well, look, in reality, I was not the fastest guy going up the hill ever, but like, get me on the velodrome and I was gnarly.
Oh yeah, because I'm sure the watts you could throw down on a track would be insane.
I had enormous legs. I was like not
because when you're 500
bike.
pounds, you got to be strong to carry all that weight around, right? So underneath all of that, I'm sure is some pretty good muscle. That was there all along.
Just to stand up, you got to have muscle.
But at a certain point, like cycling, no bueno for you. Like what happened with that?
It just
Did you just deplete your adrenals and just, take it all the way to the wall until
basically I had a bad accident. I would ride with the Helen's guys. And
you do the Mandeville, that Mandeville ride that we do.
That was my day off ride. No, not Mandeville. I would do the Lagrange ride on Sunday.
That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. Mandeville was the Wednesday ride. And that was easy because it was the shortest ride, just to the top of Mandeville. But I would come from the valley, from Studio City, go down, ride that ride. And that was the easiest. If we didn't go like deep up PCH, it was a very short ride for me. 40, 50 miles, not bad. It was one of those things where I had a bad accident. I wound up in the hospital. I had 30-some stitches in my head, tore the skin off my hands, herniated my quad on my bar. And then I went back and I was tentative going back, but I still did a bunch of rides. I did the, the Helen's team does a yearly thing in Solvang. I went out and did that, but was the slowest guy because I was really out of shape at that point. And then I had to work. And my wife was like, you can't retire.
You're not a professional cyclist.
Yeah, like, what are you doing?
The amount of time it takes is just bananas.
Yeah, to
makes
be
golf
really
look
good.
Like, trivial.
Yeah, but I took a bike like in 2012. I went to New York to do Wolf of Wall Street, and I was going to be there for 7 or 8 months. So I took a bike with me and I would ride it up and down the West Side Highway and then cut over the George Washington Bridge. And there were a couple
the 9W
climbs.
Bear Mountain ride.
Yeah. I would do that. And then I think I discovered CrossFit. I discovered the rowing machine and was like, oh, I can get on this rowing machine and really bang out a great workout in an hour. And I don't have to be on a bike for 5 hours.
And be exhausted for the whole day, for your work day, you know.
So I would start doing like marathons on a rowing machine and lifting weights and kettlebells. And I had like very little upper body mass at that point and was like, what if I, did some push-ups and some bench press? And then that was interesting for a while.
And now you're just an animal in the gym. I mean, you're just a beast.
I'm trying. I've gotten even that. I'm trying to exercise radical moderation. Like I used to go.
Everything is an obsession in waiting.
Yeah, yeah, it can be. And now I'm like, can I get my workout in 45 minutes? That's like my mission nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it doesn't commandeer your entire life.
Yeah,
and you have good energy throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bit where it was like I got to fill this loose skin with muscle, and then when I stopped living in Fantasyland and did a little rough math, the amount of muscle I'd have to build to actually stretch out my loose skin, I'd weigh 800 pounds or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I gave up on that pursuit. And so now it's just a matter of communicating with my muscles that I appreciate you, I admire you, stick around, don't go anywhere. I'm not trying to get bigger. And that's really, and then going to the gym provides me with some more mental clarity for the day.
For sure. As we enter 2025, we each have 365 blank pages waiting to be filled. So maybe you're ready for a plot twist, or perhaps there's a chapter of your life you've wanted to revise. But it's not about resolutions that fade by February. It's about becoming the author of your own story. Therapy can be like having an editorial partner on this journey. It's not just for crisis moments. It's for anyone looking to develop better coping skills, establish better, healthier boundaries, or simply help you to become your best self. All of which experience has taught me, as someone who's been in therapy for decades, is something you really can't do alone. Everybody needs expert feedback. So if you're considering therapy, which I think you should, BetterHelp makes it highly accessible. It's fully online and tailored to fit your schedule. You complete a questionnaire to match with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time without incurring extra costs or any charges. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/richroll today to get 10% off your first month. There's a lot of discussion around the number of hours we need to sleep to be well. But actually, it's the quality of our sleep that matters most, how restful, which of course is a function of your sleep environment, the foundation of which, of course, is your mattress. If you've had the privilege of slumbering on a birch, you already know well that a mattress is not just a mattress. It is truly a worthy investment in your well-being that will return your life 100-fold. Why? Because all birch mattresses are crafted with organic fair trade cotton, natural latex, and other responsibly sourced materials. The natural materials make it hypoallergenic and help regulate temperature. And while their non-toxic construction means no harmful off-gassing, it's that kind of thoughtful design that makes a real difference in your sleep quality. It's that kind of thoughtful design that makes a real difference in your sleep quality. You know what? I would like all of you, all my viewers, to enjoy what I'm enjoying, which is a deep, restful night's sleep with a new mattress from Birch. To do that, go to birchliving.com/richroll for their spring savings event, 20% off site-wide. That's birchliving.com/richroll and get 20% off site-wide. Back to those early days, though, when this was just beginning, like how did you instigate the fitness and the diet? Like what was when you finally locked onto this, what were the steps that you took that ended up being effective in retrospect amidst all of the kind of missteps?
Yeah, it's really funny. The gal who's my wife, I like landed in Eastern Europe to do a movie and was devastated. It was as though I had been completely blind to myself and then stood in front of a mirror for a while going like, oh my God, you got to take a long, hard look and we're not going to look away. And I thought, the only thing I'm suddenly thinking about the future, and the only thing that mattered to me in that moment was this relationship I was building with the girl who's now my wife. And if I don't tell her the secret that I'm morbidly obese, which I think she doesn't know, if I don't tell her that, then I lose her because she's going to figure it out, right? One of these days, she's going to peek behind the curtain and see me. And if I tell her and she sees it now, I'm going to reveal this horror story to her, and she's going to. But I'm damned if I do, or I'm damned if I don't. I want to have a life with her. My behavior's been like not so honest and forthright. Like, she wants to go to the beach. I can't do that today. I'll see you later tonight for dinner. She wants to go to a museum. I can't do that because walking through a museum's tiring. All these active things that she's interested in, I'm kind of finding reasons not to do with her. I also felt embarrassed for her to like hold my hand in public because my shame would bleed over into her. So I'd walk behind her or in front of her, and there was no public affection. And like all of that felt unhealthy to me. And so I recruited her to help me. I said like, hey, I have this problem. I'm obese and I want to change that. And she, like, to this day, it was as though I was telling her, I'd robbed a bank or killed somebody and she didn't know about it. Like, that's how I felt communicating this to her. And I thought like, and I listened so closely, like, am I going to hear judgment? Am I going to hear relief? And either of those things I think might have messed with me. But she was like, okay, yeah, great. So what do you want to do? Do you want me to help you? How do you want me to help you? And I was like, I don't know what to do. And the very first thing she told me to do in Eastern Europe was, okay, for the rest of the time that you're there, just don't eat bread. Now, bread for me then became this poisonous thing for many years. But that wasn't the point. The point was exercise some responsibility. Take one small step towards exercising restraint and responsibility. And that I learned to do. I didn't separate the two and realize the actual moral of the story that she gave me on that day for many years, because I eat bread all the time now. Whereas when she said that, I just thought, okay, bread's the problem. If I get rid of bread, I'm now on the path to recovery. But I was able to make it through the rest of that trip without eating bread. And that was kind of my first step.
Your wife sounds like a remarkable woman. Like, clearly she loved you and loves you for you, right? Like,
which is bizarre. Which is fucking bizarre, to be honest with you.
Well, we're all broken toys. Yeah. You know what I mean? How could we possibly be lovable? Yeah. I share that. But what she did deserves to kind of be explored a little bit more, because I think it's really powerful. You were able to change not because she was vibing you to change, but because she allowed you to be you and gave you the space to arrive in a place of willingness on your own. And when you were ready, she was there to support you, but she wasn't nudging you or urging you towards that. And it gets back to this willingness idea. Like, she wouldn't have been able to make you willing to make that change. She trusted that you would find your way, and I think that is an incredibly difficult gesture of love. Like, we can say, oh, it's loving to like want your partner to, improve or do something that's in their best interest. But like, true unconditional love is like, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I believe in you to find your way and what's right for you. And I'm going to love you either way.
Yeah.
Like, that is a remarkable thing. And you found your way to willingness. Finally, you had some willingness. And I think the advice around bread is actually really good. It gets to the complexity of all of this because like, I know as an AA person, like I need those binary rules.
Right.
I mean, I know that like my entree into like the eating plant-based is because it's like, it's easy. It's like, I don't eat meat or dairy, like, and I needed that. I needed that like structure. It's like, I know I don't drink or use, like I can get my head around that. Like, and this is just simple enough. And so the bread thing is like, oh, I can understand that. It gets messy later when all the alcoholic obsession, starts to
and then
metastasize
when you haven't
that.
lost all the weight you want to lose because you're not eating bread. When you still have the problem as you perceive it, despite doing the work to eliminate the problem, it becomes complicated.
Yeah. But you took action.
Yeah.
And I think behind that also, like this idea that like, I have to tell her this secret, whether or not like, it's hard to believe that you would believe that she wouldn't know that. Like, let's take that for granted as true. But the important part of it is that you decided you weren't going to keep secrets from her anymore. Like you're a guy who'd been keeping secrets your whole life. So it was this commitment to yourself to be transparent in a vulnerable way that opened up the space for you to be receptive and to grow and change.
I think there's a point there that you made, because I think it's not that I thought she was honestly unaware of it, because it's impossible not to be unaware of it. But it's that if I show her that it's not something I am comfortable with, then it allows her to be uncomfortable with it. Do you know what I mean? Like if I have this false sense of, I don't know, that if it's not a part of my attention, if I'm confident, if I reveal that I'm actually not confident, then it allows
that you have a weakness.
That I have. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's the strangest feeling I've ever had, because it's like I'm describing a blue car to somebody who's sitting there looking at a blue car with me. You know what I mean? Like
the secret isn't that you were obese. The secret was that you felt shame about that.
That's
right. And like having the courage to like share that is a vulnerable like gesture.
Yeah.
That's scary. Like how is my partner going to receive this?
Yeah. And later in life, like I've written a book and it's with my publisher. And so I had to go and like really talk to my wife about this, because I never really got into it with her. Like, why were you with me? Like, were you waiting for that? Did you have faith that I was going to change prior to that? And then I realized, like, I don't even want to know, because everything that happened feels like a miracle to me. And so the nuts and bolts of it are irrelevant.
Yeah. So you never asked her that?
I mean, I touched on it with her and she's like, I don't know. I wasn't thinking about it. Like, she really is just this miraculous angel of a person who loved me.
Yeah. So the bread didn't work.
Well, I was able to do it. I was able to not eat bread.
Which is a win, right?
It's a win.
Like you were able to master one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bread, not eating bread, did not produce 300 pounds of weight loss, unfortunately, and then, I came back and she was like, I'll have something ready for you in LA, but just do this while you're there. And when you get back, I'll have a whole thing set up for you to do here. And I did a liquid diet for 2 months. And I lost like 80 pounds doing that liquid diet.
In 2 months?
In 2 months.
Wow.
It was awesome. It was, there's nothing that motivates you quite like success. Every day I saw weight loss on that liquid diet.
What was in the liquid?
It was like probably 500 calories a day of protein and some, powdered greens, and then a bunch of fiber pills and some vitamins.
There is a sort of euphoria that comes with that also, right? And the alcoholic mind will latch onto that and say, this is the solution to my problems. I'm never going to eat food again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found it.
There was something.
Did you have that?
100%.
Yeah.
I wanted abstinence at that time. I thought that was the solution. And the problem was that by the end of the second month, like every time I stood up, I would black out, not to the point of collapse, but like my vision would go dark, my hearing would get thick and distant, and I'd have to like steady myself and wait for my vision to come back. And that was like, okay, maybe I can't do this forever.
500 calories a day with that much body mass to fuel. I mean, you're cannibalizing yourself every day.
Yeah.
And then after that?
Then it was the blood type diet. And that was also pretty easy. You know, bread was off limits, but I could have like vegetables and meat, and that was not difficult. And then the problem came about when I just stopped losing weight. I could overeat through the intervention of the blood type diet.
So at this point, you'd lost how much? From 500 down to
550 down to around
550.
400.
Wow.
Maybe 375.
And then you plateau.
And then I plateau.
And rubber band back.
Like, no, I didn't rubber band back from that. I mean, I did gain some weight, but I never went back up to 500. Because from that point on, I would get down to, over the past 20 years, I got down to 200. I went back up to 400. I got down to 300. I went up to 375. Like there were bands like that, but I never got back anywhere near 500.
With all the rubber banding, and then now in this, stable situation that you're in right now, I mean, we could talk all day about like what worked and what didn't. I'm less interested in the details of that. It's all very personalized, individualized. But from those experiences of succeeding and failing and rubber banding and relapsing and back and forth, and now it's cycling, now it's a gym. I mean, you have compiled like an encyclopedia of principles around transformation and change.
Yeah.
So if you had to write a book and it had like 10 chapters, like each one being one of these principles, like what rises to the top in your mind as the most important factors for somebody who is contemplating making a change?
Having a plan for the day and then preparing for the plan to go out the window once you meet reality, and having another plan and having as many plans as you can consider, and then having a plan for when all of the plans fail, and kind of, getting through the day is the most important thing. Realizing that the weight isn't the issue at all, that the weight is a byproduct or a symptom of the issue, that it will, look, if you need to lose 10 pounds that you put on during COVID, or, you twisted your ankle and were laid up for a few months or something like that, then none of this applies to you. But if you've been overweight your whole life, there's likely not going to be an intervention that you apply that then when you're done, you don't have to keep applying to some degree. My big fear now, like I'm a fan of the GLP-1s for the morbidly obese. I'm also glad that I achieved this prior to their advent. But my fear with them is that people are going to use them like fad diets, and that what we'll see long term is a version of what I did in those years, which was find something that takes weight off really quick. You're losing muscle mass and fat. And by the way, any diet, any extreme diet, you're losing muscle mass and fat. Doesn't matter if it's keto and you're eating a bunch of meat. If you're losing a pound a day, some portion of that is lean tissue. But you get on them for 3 months, you lose 30 pounds, you get off them, you gain the 30 pounds back. 40% of what you lost is muscle, and 100% of what you gain back is fat. And so we could see over a long period of time, people's weight stay static, if not rise a little bit, but their body fat percentage skyrocket. And that worries me because there is no consideration to anything but that the weight is the problem. not a byproduct or a symptom of the problem.
Also, you're missing the whole piece around developing discipline and a connection with your body and your mind. Like, you have extraordinary discipline and you've done the inside work to untangle those knots and understand, why you tick the way that you tick. And if you just inject yourself with something they're appropriate for people who are, it's like obesity is driving all these chronic lifestyle ailments. Like, you have to, if the house is on fire, you got to deal with that first. So I'm not against this in any way. But in terms of like what you had to learn about yourself and the way your mind and your body works by going through this process has placed you in this sort of sensei position. You know what I mean? Like, you've done the work. And so what you have to say about this matters versus somebody who, took a different route to it.
It's such a tricky thing because I'm trying to be as open and honest as possible, but there is a team out there that is, these are life-saving drugs, and if you say anything bad about them, you're killing people. And then there's another team that is, these are gonna result in killing people. You can't say anything good about them. There's such a lack of nuance. I don't know if it's as big today, but there was a whole thing about keto and sugar is killing it and carbohydrates are killing everyone.
Well, we just cycle through this, by the season.
Right. Nuance is lost.
Yeah. And it deserves nuance. I think, like I said, these drugs are appropriate. But are you, when you're on them, are you using that period of time to learn about nutrition and develop, better eating habits and breaking old habits? Or are you just coasting by eating less of the shitty foods that you're eating? And when you go off it, you haven't really prepared yourself for how to live without it. And these people rubber band back and then go back on it. And do we end up with a worse obesity problem or other downstream side effects from this drug that we don't even know about yet?
Yeah. I have a daughter with type 1 diabetes, and that point of view that I'm seeing so many people take would be like the point of view of me realizing that my daughter's body is not producing insulin, and so she has to get insulin through a bolus of an injection. Mm-hmm. And then looking at her blood sugar when it's normal and going, well, she doesn't need insulin anymore. She's done. She's solved. It's not going to be a problem anymore. These medications, and who knows if they're going to have new medications down the line, but these medications are designed to be lifetime medications. They're not designed for short-term use. They're not designed so that when you lose your 30 or 50 or 100 pounds that you come off of them, because the doctors who are prescribing them know that 99.9% of the people are going to gain that weight back. Now, it's not an absolute, but there are no absolutes in science. This is the realm of wanting to win the lottery. I'll be the one guy that doesn't gain the weight back. But what about all the diets that you tried where you ate 500 calories a day, lost weight really fast, and then gained the weight back once you jumped off the diet? It's no different. It just makes it less hard.
What do you think is the primary differentiator between somebody who can make this type of change and sustain it versus the person who struggles and gives up?
I think that really looking at the fact that it is going to be a lifetime commitment, that there's no finish line, that the weight is a sign of something else happening, that somebody who's looking at it in that way will have a better shot at success. Because if you just go into a diet going, I need to lose 30 pounds, and once I lose 30 pounds or whatever, pick any number, 300 pounds, that I'm done, I think you're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah. There's so much gray in all of this. It's so easy to be reductive about it. Here's what you do. And we want, you're talking about you need a plan, and you need a plan for the plan. And there's lots of plans out there.
Yeah.
I'll take this plan. This plan's going to solve my problem. But it's so much more than that. you need the discipline and the hard work and the ability to suffer periods of discomfort and, all these types of things. But you also have to be kind to yourself. And, you have to allow yourself to mess up, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater when you have those missteps. And you have to be flexible enough to know, like, okay, well, this program that I thought was going to solve everything isn't working, and I need to do something different now. The truth doesn't lend itself to any kind of like 10-step program that is going to work. And I think the real solution is in like the healing the inner, right? So that you can have the soft when you need it and the hard when you need it. But it's not all about self-will and discipline and hard work and pain and suffering. It's also, as you know, as a sober person, it's surrender and it's letting go and it's compassion, right? And how do you marry these two kind of opposing forces in a way that's driving your life forward?
I do some coaching. It's not like a come contact me type of a thing, but I do work with some people. And this is the biggest point of trying to get somebody to understand it. And I think, unfortunately, it's a little bit like the willingness piece where you can't tell them the secret. They have to come to it on their own a little bit through trial and error, unfortunately. But it's like the serenity prayer sums it up so perfectly. There is something that you have to accept because it's not changeable. And you have to figure out what you can change and then just work on changing that. And if you're coming at it, because I did this, tried to harm myself thin, tried to punish myself into a better body, that's not sustainable either. There has to be some grace given to yourself and doing it out of compassion and kindness, or I don't think it works.
Yeah. It's for whom and when, right?
Yeah.
Like certain people, they need the Goggins message, you know what I mean? Because they can't get off the couch. They could use a little discipline and a little slap on the ass to get up and get out the door.
And sometimes I like that too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think we all need that.
Right.
And, God bless David Goggins for making himself available, to all of us for that.
But it can't.
But there are
be
other
the only
people
thing,
who are so down that rabbit hole, and they need to be pulled out and given a hug.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and told that they're worthwhile and lovable. Even if they can't lose the weight or achieve the fitness goal.
That's right. Yeah.
And without those two things, like you're like missing an appendage, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to. I'm like, hats off to you to try to counsel people through this sort of thing.
It's tough, because, and I relate to it so much, but I think some of the most meaningful conversations I have are talking to somebody and understanding or trying to understand their experience as thoroughly as possible and sharing my experience and going like, here's why what you're trying to do didn't work for me. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to work for you, but here are all the traps I encountered in that. It's some of the most meaningful stuff I've ever done.
Yeah. That's a version of what we learn in AA, which is we don't tell people what to do or give advice. We share our experience.
Yeah.
And if you can glean insights from my personal experience, then it's on you to figure out how to integrate that into your life.
Yeah. This has slightly more like
a little bit. Don't do that.
Listen, if you're eating 5,000 calories a day, you're going to.
In my experience, this doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it's a marriage of these two things,
Yeah. You have to do and you have to undo.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a Zen koan.
Yeah.
What are some common like tropes out there around weight loss and fitness that you think are wrong, that are misleading people?
Fat people are lazy. This is, I think, very misleading because first of all, just in an almost comedic sense, do you know how hard it is to be obese? Like it's very difficult. You have to and not that food is super expensive or the amount of junk food is just omnipresent. Every point of commerce, you can get 2,000 calories for a couple bucks. But just moving through space and time is difficult. That's one of them. I don't know. There's so many, I think the insulin model for obesity is just completely ridiculous and sent a bunch of people down a path that it's not that it's not sustainable. I just think for the people who are like me at all, it's not going to get them anywhere near where they want to be. You'll lose weight. The majority of weight that you lose that first couple of weeks is water. And there's no acknowledgement of that. When you stop eating carbohydrates, your body just purges itself of glycogen and hydration. And like that will keep you coming back. Like you gain your weight back and you go, but like, I want that incentive that I got the first week of doing keto. I lost 10 pounds. I want that win again. But it's not getting you where you want to go because you're not addressing the fact that you're taking in more energy than your body needs.
How important is momentum?
It's very important.
Find it to talk a little bit about this because I have some thoughts on this.
Okay, so like for me, I was on a plane yesterday, got up at the crack of dawn, didn't sleep much, arrived here in California, had a couple things to do, never got to the gym. This morning, didn't get a great night's sleep, didn't go to the gym.
Yeah.
Now, that's 2 days in a row. I don't go 7 days to the gym, but I've now missed 2 days. Tomorrow, there are going to be 300 reasons sitting in the forefront of my mind why going to the gym isn't necessary, that I'm going to have to fight through slightly harder than I otherwise would. When I get to the gym on Monday and I don't miss a day, going on Friday is a piece of cake, going on Saturday is a piece of cake. But when I miss one day, getting back to it has lost some of that momentum and it's just harder.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously consistency is the most important thing, but what happens when you're consistent is you create momentum.
Yeah.
And I like to think of momentum as like a spiritual force. Like it has its own field of energy. We all know how easy it is to go to the gym when we've gone, 28 days in a row before that.
That's right.
It's an autopilot thing. It's an afterthought, right? And then you have that interrupting situation. You go to a wedding, you travel, whatever, you get thrown off. And suddenly it's hard. Like, why is that? It doesn't make any sense.
No.
And so I just think when you've cultivated and developed, you have some momentum going, like you got to fucking protect that against, like that is like to be dealt with reverence, knowing that it will get interrupted at some point. But when you have it, like really seeing it for what it is and respecting it,
it's magical.
It becomes like it's a very powerful thing, I think.
And
then having the ability to have grace with yourself when life happens and you do get interrupted, and doing that thing that we also learn in AA, which is like, if you relapse and then you beat yourself up, you've made the second mistake, right? So just how quickly can you get back to, square one and start to rebuild again and not, be in that shame spiral that, we've all experienced when we allow ourselves to, fall a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, and even being aware of it too, because when you get the momentum and then it is hard, you can remind yourself, but it's not going to be hard forever. I'm going to get that momentum back. I'm going to get that wind beneath me that's going to help push me. I just have to get back to it.
It's tough though, man. Like you fall off and then you're like, it's too hard, forget it. And then you just give up. And then like your habits across the board in every aspect of your life, just, you go to pot as a result.
You're waiting for the gift of desperation to get you back into it. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Pain is such an amazing motivator for this. Like I know, I don't go out of my way to, make changes in my life unless I'm backed into a corner. And it's always confounding that choice is available to us. Like we don't have to be in pain. We don't have to be in crisis. We don't have to have congested heart failure, all these things like that you had to go through to become the person you are. How do you counsel people around trying to make that choice short of, the elevator going all the way down to the ground floor?
This is where that piece of willingness comes in, where I'm not out there trying to convert people. I'm only really talking to people who are there and just going like, tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. And I'm, one of the things that I'm not super interested in doing is spreading some message of the right way, because I don't really believe that I could broadcast the right way to everyone. But if I have somebody who I can really talk to and get a really as clear a picture of their circumstances as possible, then I can make implementations that I think will be beneficial to them. But that's, if you come up to me on the street and say, how'd you do it? I'm going to give you a very truthful but dishonest answer, which is diet and exercise. That's the truth, but it's so dishonest. It's lacking a 2-hour conversation,
Yeah. How has your sense of potential and possibility shifted as a result of this? Like as an artist and as a dad and a grandfather, right? You have a granddaughter
and a grandson.
Oh, you have 2 grandkids.
2 grandkids, yeah.
That's insane.
It's incredible.
How old are you?
49.
You must have been young when you had kids.
My wife was 20 when she had her first.
Wow.
The 2 older kids are my stepkids, but I've been raising them since they were 3 and 5.
Yeah, similar. I have two stepkids and two kids. Similar situation. No grandkids yet, though.
They're coming.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Having accomplished these things, obviously, self-esteem is a product of performing esteemable acts for yourself, right? And so that's very empowering. And I would imagine shifts your worldview on like what you're capable of and what the kind of person that you could become as somebody who's continually trying to grow and evolve.
Yeah. There's an idea for me. The thing that I like to do is to imagine in a way that you're talking about who I would like to be, who I would like to evolve into. And then even if it's just so absurdly far-fetched, I'm aiming in that direction. I'm casting my line towards that, so that every day I'm transforming, even if it's imperceptible. I want to be transforming a little bit or growing more towards that person. And the idea of impossible, dude, my life is a fairy tale. And I'm still have this kind of corrupt narcissism where I think people are looking at me and talking about me and don't like me, and I'm still embarrassed about myself, and I often have to tell that voice to shut the fuck up and to get out of the way, because I'm awesome and I'm doing great and I have people in my life who love me very much. And if that voice is right and there is somebody out there saying bad things, then that person is irrelevant to my life and the person I want to become.
How does this translate into your parenting?
Parenting has been interesting. I was raised in a very, food was regulated. And so I wanted very much to be not, I thought that was one of the main drivers to me going the route I did. When my daughter, who's now 20, was 4, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And suddenly I found myself having to restrict her food. Not saying no necessarily to stuff, but juice for her was literally medicinal or poison in very stark terms. If she had juice without really, she should never have juice unless she has crashing low blood sugar, and then it's to save her life. And that was a real mind fuck, dude. It was really
it's like
hard.
the universe designed this. Like the one thing that, is your biggest like trigger and pain point.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, now you're in a position where you have to do this for your kid.
You have to. And it actually, in a strange way, allowed me to forgive my parents, because my parents were doing exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. Now, I look at a picture of myself at 5 and don't see a little kid who's obese and needs to be on a diet. Doesn't matter. They did. They saw a situation and they thought, we have to do something about this, in the exact same way that I see the situation with my daughter when she's 4 and go like, fuck, we can't keep juice in the house. And if we do, it's medicinal, While
also not trying to repeat, like instill that same trauma in her and that fear, right?
Which is, I think, impossible not to when you have a 4-year-old.
She has a disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to police what she's eating.
And I'm now the cop saying, no, you can't eat that. Or if you eat that and I give you insulin for it, you have to eat that now. It was so fucked up. And I didn't navigate it perfectly. And I battled with it a lot. And it was very, very hard. And like, woe is me. It was hard on her. And she's like very toughened because of it. And she's doing great. But we struggled for a long time. She wound up going to a boarding school, and I had, when she was 12, 13, 14, her continuous glucose monitor I had the app, so I could look at it. So I knew what her blood sugar was 24 hours a day. And I would call her panicked 5-6 times a day, going like, why haven't you taken insulin? What are you doing? Or calling a teacher to go, her blood sugar's too low. Go make her drink juice,
Which is just a different version of what your dad did to you.
That's right.
That caused that rift.
That's right. And it was completely insane. And I'll tell you this, in all honesty, her A1C was elevated until I said, listen, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to turn this over to you, and whatever happens to you, it's on you. And I think I tried that once, but not honestly. I was still sneaking peaks of her blood sugar, and there was no change. And I'm panicking and freaking out and thinking my kid's going to die, and how could I let her die? But when I finally really did it, deleted the app from my phone and really said, I'm not going to even talk to you about this anymore. I think 3 months later, she had a normal A1C, or maybe it was 6 months later. But
give her the space to take ownership of it and figure it out. I mean, you basically had to do what your wife did for you.
Yeah. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, because I felt like my kid's life was on the line. And it was, to a degree, but it wasn't my place to be responsible for her life anymore.
It's scary though. That's hard as a parent.
Yeah.
That's an extreme example.
Dude, I can't believe that's what the universe gave me.
I know. It's like, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It was like perfectly, it's like, how can you not have some connection with spirituality? It's like so, clear as day that there's like this lesson for you to learn here.
Yeah.
But on top of that, just being this disciplined person around food and exercise, but also having had such bad experiences with all of that as a kid, and having all kinds of complicated emotions around it, there's no clear line as to how you guide the young people in your house. You don't want to push them in the way that you were pushed, type 1 diabetic aside.
I didn't want to push them at all. I wanted to just I'm going to be a good example, and I'm going to allow you guys, we're very much the house where with substances, my wife drinks. There's alcohol in our house. She does not have a problem with it. I did not want to create a problem for my kids. And so we were the house that was like, listen, if you guys want to do something, fine, you just communicate with us and you can do it here. And we're not going to yell and scream and tell you you're bad. If you're ever at a party and you don't have a ride home or you're drunk, call us. We'll come and get you at any time of the night. There will be no judgment. We don't even have to talk about it if you really don't want to, but please recognize that we're not gonna judge you for this. And that seems to have worked pretty well. That has been successful.
That's the most important thing in my experience of parenting. You want to be the person that they instantly call when they're in a problem and they're not hung up about it, because you've built that foundation of trust and open communication where they feel safe and they feel like, the way I was like the last person I would call is my parent. I'd call anybody but them, right? Terrified, ashamed, all of that. And in my experience, in order to achieve that kind of open communication where they feel like they're trusted and accepted and all of that, you have to let go of being too much of a taskmaster. Well, you know what I mean? You got to you lead by example. These are the habits, and this is how we eat here, or these are the things I do, without that unhealthy expectation or attachment that they have to follow you, and hope that they learn over time through osmosis that what you're doing is healthy, or they get to make their own judgments around that, while also recognizing they have to find themselves. And in order to do that, they have to push against you and go out and do other things. And you have to have space for that.
It's the realization that you're dealing with another human being.
Yeah. Who's sentient and
right. There's this
sovereign.
There's this thing of going this is my kid, as though I have ownership over this, right. and I'm shaping it in my image to some degree. And the morals must be the same, and the ideas and the points of view about the world must be the ones I instill in this person. And the realization that oh no, that's just a human being that I've spent a lot of time with. And all I want to do, my job is to not infect that person with my garbage. That's the biggest gift I can give to my kids.
So the communication's good these days.
Yeah.
That's the good thing. Yeah. The older you get too, it's just you just want them to call.
That's it. Yeah. I check in, chat with them.
What are the things that are still a big struggle for you that throw you off your game?
Travel is tough. I find myself traveling a lot. That throws me off my game a little bit, but it's not, there is still this sneaking desire that comes up every now and again that I want to graduate from the program. You know what I mean? That I want the degree, and then I want to not have to think about it anymore. And that's really dangerous. And that's something I have to keep in check every now and again. I have to really bring myself back down and go oh, you better check in with somebody, dude.
Do you, this psychiatrist, Phil Stutz? I've had him on the show a couple times.
Oh, did somebody made a movie about him? Yeah. He lives
Jonah Hill made a documentary about him.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful, remarkable guy, but he has these three truths about life. And, he sees all these ballers and high rolling, dudes who have everything and are unhappy. Right.
Right.
And he's most of them are unhappy or dissatisfied with their life because they fail to recognize these three fundamental truths of life, which are pain, uncertainty, and the need for constant work. And I have a bracelet with these things on it.
Yeah.
It's there's no destination here. You will never conquer uncertainty.
Yeah.
You'll never work so hard and amass so much or get to a place where you're not going to have to deal with shit that just goes haywire. There's always going to be pain, and you're always going to have to do work.
Yeah.
And if you can accept that, then maybe you can meet these obstacles and these challenges with a little more grace, because you're not expecting it to be otherwise.
Don't you think just that meeting them intentionally gets you almost all the way there, just going like, this is the obstacle, this is the task for today or for my life. But I think that I was constantly trying to avoid those obstacles by just doing something else or feeling bad for myself or using substances or eating my way through pain and uncertainty and the need to do work.
Sure.
Just being aware of it is the game.
Being aware of it. And I think it does have a lot to do with, especially as like somebody in recovery, like I can get attached in an unhealthy way to almost anything.
Sure.
And part of that attachment, whether it's a particular diet or a training regimen, is this implicit promise in it that like if you do this thing, it's gonna fix you and solve your problems, and you won't have to deal with uncertainty. Like there's it's the control, right?
Yeah.
It's like back to the serenity prayer. Like you're deluding yourself into thinking that you can exert control over your life if you just follow these certain protocols. And even if those protocols are moving your life forward in a positive way, that relationship is unhealthy if it's loaded, with that like false promise.
Yeah.
And the acceptance piece is like, this is good, I'll keep doing this. But, fundamentally I'm still in a human body, and this is not going to absolve me of all the pain and uncertainty and difficulty that I'll inevitably have to face in my life.
I love that. For the longest time I was communicating about this only on like Instagram, and it's a picture, and then I would go to write about it, and then you're limited to something 2,500 characters, which is you can't communicate all that much. Now on Substack, I can write an essay, and it can be as long as I want, and that's the piece, is being able to communicate to people that like, I've lost 300 pounds. I'm sober. I'm happily married. I have 4 beautiful daughters. I have 2 grandchildren. I consider my life a fairy tale. I look at my life and think it couldn't have gone any better. There is not one aspect of it. And still I struggle every day. And still there's pain, and still there's setbacks, and still there's difficulty and barriers that I have to overcome. And that's a hard message sometimes to communicate in 5-10 words in a caption or with a picture.
Your Substack is fantastic, and
thanks,
you're
man.
a really good writer. Like it's very poetic the way that you share, and so much thought has gone into these pieces that you write. Like this is the perfect platform for you.
I love it. It's my favorite thing to do because I want to get into as much nuance as possible. Because that's all I lacked for so long was don't eat carbohydrates. It was this binary, which works for me in sobriety. I love the binary. I love the binary in life. It's very easy to be a yes or no. I'm on this team or I'm on that team. But that doesn't get you there with food because you don't stop eating.
But you have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And some people need the binary, they have to do that before they have to do the doing part before you can get to the undoing part.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, it's so difficult. Like you said it earlier, like I'm not here I can't tell you what to do or not to do.
No.
Those are decisions you have to make, which makes it such an intractable problem to solve because we all just want like, Ethan, you did it.
My wife amazingly is like, you tell me what to do all the time. Like she'll come to me and I'll say to her, I've known you for 30 years. I know your habits. I know your preferences. I know what your willingness level is. I know that, so yeah, I'll tell you what to do because I've got all this data. If I'm sitting with somebody and I can take an inventory of their life, then I'm more than happy to say, you should do this. But, spreading that on the internet, I think is actually dangerous. I think sending a message out there that everyone should do X, devoid of nuance, I think is actually dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes it, my next question is like, when are you writing a book?
Yeah, I've written one. Yeah. But again, it's non-prescriptive. It's very much just, here's what I went through. Here's what I went through in this situation. And here's what I went through in this situation. But the idea of saying like, you should food journal. I will say I found food journaling to be super helpful, but I'm not going to say everybody should food journal.
Yeah. I think there's the here's what I did and why I did it book, but I think there's another book in you that is a more philosophical approach to all of this that isn't necessarily a how-to book, but is like a perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think you have thought about this so deeply and you're so good at putting words to it without being preachy or, overly directive to people. But that's a hard book to write.
It's a hard book to write. Yeah. I am actually toying with that with a philosophy professor, with a version of that. But it's amazing that you said that, because it is actually, that's the direction we're going in, But it's broader, like for me, when I read Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird or Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, those books to me are diet books.
Oh yeah.
Or if I'm struggling with, if I'm having a rough day, if suddenly the laws are more lenient and I see a guy shooting up on the corner and suddenly that idea's in my head and I open one of those books are about sobriety. Or if I'm struggling with work, those books are about work. So diet is found for me more in philosophical texts that are talking about being more harmonious with the universe.
Right. It's not about the food. It's about your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And in order to understand that, you got to go all the way back to the beginning and you got to cast yourself all the way forward, and you have to be a Calvinist and a Buddhist.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough.
Yeah.
And it's doubly tougher when you have somebody telling you just don't eat carbohydrates or lectins or seed oils, that seed oils and red dye 40 are the problem. I made the terrible mistake of saying to my family over the holidays that I did not think RFK was going to in fact make America healthy again. And this is not a knock on him. I think he's pretty cool, but I don't think that banning red dye 40 solves the obesity crisis.
It's a distraction.
Yeah.
Nor does beef tallow at whatever fast food. Right? It's like, this is not really getting to the heart of what we really need to be talking about.
That's right.
It's trendy and fun and it gets headlines, but it's missing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I also
substituting corn oil for regular sugar. That's not going to make, that's not going to kill the Coca-Cola industry,
Yeah, it's almost like encouraging people to go and eat those French fries and drink the Coke, right?
Right. That's right. There you go.
The other piece that I think is worthy of noting with you is that these changes that you've made in your life with food and with fitness are much more than that, in that, like when I read your Substack posts or I just being in your presence, it's obvious. Like you're somebody who's just committed to change as a way of being. Like growth is your mandate.
Yeah.
And that has manifested in your relationship with food and your body and fitness and the like. But what you're not doing, that I see so many people do, is get caught up in one lane. Like whether it's a particular diet or a particular, approach to fitness or being a certain kind of athlete, and then suddenly becoming an evangelist of that.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens is people make a change, their life becomes so much better, and they're so enthusiastic about it. They want to shout from the mountaintops to everybody about how amazing it is, because it was so positively transformative. But then what liberated them, it becomes a prison and keeps them stuck. And they stay in that place and they don't continue to grow and evolve and change in all these other ways. And like, for me, I always look at it like, for example, triathlon or ultra endurance sports. Like, this was an incredible teacher. I learned so much about myself, but if I stayed in it and just kept racing and racing and racing, like the dividend on that starts to get pretty slim, right? Like, how many more lessons am I going to learn? Like, I can always try to go further or faster or farther or whatever. And there's always something to be learned by taking your body to, that edge. But I have so many other blind spots in my life where I'm a screw up and I trip myself up. And if I stay over here, I'm really just like in denial or avoidance of that. And I'm trying to always like have the courage to like walk into those areas that I really don't want to.
Yeah.
Because that's the impulse that got me on this journey to begin with, right? And it feels like a betrayal to not keep doing it. And I'm not saying I do it perfectly. I'm terrible at it. Like I don't want to do any of this.
Right.
But I feel like you're kindred in that. Like it's not about the food and the weight and the fitness. It's about like trying to live an expansive life.
Yeah. It's the idea that, I found with anything that I get a hankering of like, I want to do something. And if I go into it feeling like I have nothing to learn, that I can just go do it, I fail. And so I want to approach everything as though there's still many lessons to learn. In the same way, it can't just be one thing, because I will slip into that. I will slip into, I'm going to just ride my bike. I'm going to just row on the rowing machine. I'm just going to do CrossFit. I'm just going to be a bodybuilder. I'm just going to do keto. I'm just going to do, bodybuilder type dieting of chicken, broccoli, and rice. And none of those present the fullness of life that I actually want. None of those allow me to be the father and husband and friend and business associate that I want to be. And so,
yeah, we do these things so that we can show up in our life.
Yeah,
in the areas of our life that are actually important.
Whereas it's very easy to make that your life and lose the rest of it. And I've done all that too. I neglected my wife and kids. I would ride my bike 8 hours a day and then be basically too tired to do anything with them. There were many years where my little kids would bake cookies and I wouldn't take a bite of them because I was being so pious with my diet that food was taboo for me, and I wouldn't share that moment with them. And I look back on that with great regret.
Right. You're like missing the bigger miracle.
Yeah. Which is just being present and being the best version of who I am today, with the idea that I'm going to improve. And that improvement doesn't have to be radical every day. It can be slight. It can be through reading or exercise or conversing. Like this for me is an improvement. This makes me better. Our conversation.
There's a soulfulness in your writing as well. Like there's a your hint without like being direct about it. Like you're always kind of like tiptoeing around or hinting at like deeper meaning here.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure like a big part of your audience are some gym bros or some overweight dudes who are looking to you as the lighthouse.
Right. And the danger would be chicken, broccoli, and rice, progressive overload. That's it. Because that is the truth. But again, I think it's dishonest. Because I think there's more than that. I think there is soulfulness to be found in all of this. What's
the one change you need to make, but you're afraid to make?
Quitting nicotine, probably.
That's a tough one.
that's probably it,
now it's a nootropic.
Right, exactly. There's more. And it staves off Alzheimer's, apparently. There's so many great benefits to nicotine. I've not had a cigarette in 20 years. But I've been woefully addicted to nicotine this whole time.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You called yourself out. Yeah. There's no secret around that.
No. I know what I mean. Look, that's a very superficial answer. I'm sure we could get really deep and
into the deep wounding.
Yeah, exactly. And I would cry and it would be hard. And then I would confront it and have to do anything about it. But I'm so aware of nicotine that I've said it to you, I'm not going to quit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I gotcha. We got to wind this up, but I want to leave people with just a little encouragement for the person who's tiptoeing around making a change, maybe is a little bit afraid, not in the practical sense, but maybe in the orienting their mind around how to approach or encourage them to take that first step and follow it up until they can get a little momentum.
So I think any point of responsibility that you can put in that's difficult without being truly burdensome as a first step can be magical. When I was 550 pounds, I remember some days just walking past my car door to the end of my car. And that was more than I had to do. And that was enough because that was something, and that you can always build on stuff.
The idea that you could barely walk to your car and then went on to ride every stage of the Tour de France.
Right, but this doesn't happen overnight.
It's stunning, I know. But it begins with that walk to the car.
That's right. You know, this is the other terrible burden of a life lived in sound bites and through Twitter, where you get however many characters. I don't know, maybe there's no limit now, but I remember when it started, it was 140 characters, and you had to like come up with your slogan that communicated everything in 2 sentences. And it's immediacy, and nothing's immediate. None of this is immediate. This conversation wasn't immediate. It took us 2 hours to get to this, you know.
And how many years of going back? I don't know when I first reached out to you or how this began, but it happened a long time ago.
A long time ago. This was a long time in the making, and this is great. Get rid of immediacy. Allow life to unfold in like this marvelous, mysterious way that it will, and take a step in a direction and then just take another step. But don't try to get to the finish line today, because there's no finish line. The finish line is death.
Mm-hmm. You said that you talk about all these things from a selfish perspective, but it really is an act of service. And I think service is your calling, and what you're doing right now is needed and incredibly nourishing to a lot of people. You know, it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, and I appreciate you coming here and sharing so openly with
Thanks
me.
for having me.
It's super inspiring, man, and I can't wait to see what you do next and this continual evolution and unfolding of your life.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited.
It was great to get to know you a little bit. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right on. Cheers. Peace, Ethan.